All right, hello everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, February 2nd. My name is Chris Latham. I'm the course director for game music composition, and we will be hanging out all throughout this month, talking about lots of different topics dealing with the role of a game composer and what it is like to work on a game project as the music composer or maybe a sound designer or just an audio person in general. What sort of things are kind of expected of you, and what do you bring to the project? And of course, our session tonight will be more, or I guess it's this afternoon, will be more towards the class overall and how the class breaks down through the month. We'll be talking about all of the assignments and the submissions and how the lectures and all of the assignments will work throughout all of the different parts and as we move forward. And our topics throughout the month will really be a discussion of the process of creation of music for a game soundtrack, what it's the kind of what sort of tools and workflow and processes are involved in the creation of music for a game. And here we got a question in the chat here. Edward, for our 2D platformer assignment, are we allowed to use any plugins that you own? Absolutely. I take the assignments and the class as a whole. As you are a music composer that has been hired on to work on a game project, I will work as the game developer, and I provide you with information about the projects and the games themselves, and then it's on you to create all of the music and sound effects. Now, what tools you use, your DAW, your plugins, your sample libraries, synths, effects, all of that stuff is up to you. I kind of take it into the view that more than likely a game team that you're working with either doesn't care or really doesn't understand all of the tools that you use. And so some of your job is interpreting their intentions and their ideas and their thoughts into the music itself. So the short answer to your question is absolutely not. You can use any plugins that you want. I don't have any sort of consideration as to how the music is actually created. So we will be you will be turning in a series of WAV files over the course of all of the different assignments, at least the game compositions, and providing me with a screenshot of your DAW session, so whether that is Logic or Pro Tools or Reaper or Ableton or Studio One or Machine or however. I definitely like to see how it was all accomplished, and I guess if things really go bad, then I'll request the session and we'll look at it and see what's happening with it. But as a general rule, you are free to use the tools that are going to create and give you the best results, because the games that you work on over the course of the month, we have 3 games. They are fully working Mac games that are for you to completely replace the music and the sound effects. So over the course of the entire month, you will be creating both the music and the sound effects, and then all of those WAV files, the assets for the game, can be placed and put into a particular file structure, and the next time you open up and load and play the game, it will play all of your music and your sound effects. So by the end of the month, you will have 3 completely working Mac game projects that all of the music and sound effects, all of the audio that is heard, is all of your custom work. So the purpose of the projects and assignments are to build out your demo reel and give you more material to really show off your work in games. Because music for games, music for a video game is best experienced while playing the game. There is certainly a different way that the music is played back in a video game than just as a linear file. We will be talking heavily, like one of the larger concepts that we discuss through the month is the idea of linear versus non-linear music. Music for a video game is a more of a non-linear approach, because as soon as you put a controller in the hands of a player, all bets are off and you have less of an idea overall as to how the music, or what sort of actions they're going to do and how they're going to play through the game. And that in turn affects how the music is played back and what they hear. So all of the music that you've probably ever worked on and written, and most music in general, is in a linear format, which means there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And every single time you rewind back and play through that song again, or go through your session again, you hear that music in the exact same way. And that you spend a whole lot of energy in a recording process, or the composition process, or the production process, and listening to the song over and over and over again. And you go through a mixing process and use automation and plugins, and you create the most perfect version of that song, and you bounce it out, and everybody listens to that one version. You put it on a disc, you sell it in a physical form, you put it on the internet, you sell it digitally, in your car, in your studio, in your club, in the every single place that that piece of music is heard, on film, on television, in a video game. Well, no, not at games yet. Is heard in the exact same way, and the production process is to get one perfect version. But in a video game, the soundtrack that is heard is going to be different for every single person that hears it, or either a little bit different or very, very different according to how they play the game. The music for a game does not exist in one long audio file somewhere on the game disc that is playing from the beginning to the middle to the end of the entire game. People get lost in games for a very, very long time. You can easily play games for hours on end. Game content or a game story can last 10 or 20 or 50 or hundreds of hours. So people get lost in major large games for a very, very long time, and that's a very good thing for the game developers. And the soundtrack that is heard, there isn't a 50-hour long audio file, or even 50 hours of music, or 100 hours of music that is playing all the way through the game experience. Music for a game exists in lots of little pieces and parts that are rearranged and put together in different orders according to the action that happens in the game, whatever the player does. So the music has to constantly react to how the game is played, what choices the player makes, what is going on in the game, the story, the objectives, the characters, all of these different things that can drive both gameplay and your music soundtrack. So we will talk about how do you create a music soundtrack where you don't really know the final result. Whenever you watch a movie, you put a DVD in, or you stream it, or however you watch movies, there is an audio track that goes from the beginning all the way to the end of the movie, and it's the same thing every single time you watch that movie. And it's just one audio file, either stereo or surround mix. But in a game, it is made up of looping files, files that only play once, maybe multiple layers of files, music, dialogue, and sound effects that all come together to create the final stereo or surround mix that you end up hearing. So it is hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of files that are all pieced together by the game in real time to create the audio soundtrack that is heard. And so the month overall is kind of divided up into two halves, where the first half of the month we discuss more of the technical side of things, No, sorry. Let's reverse that. In the beginning part of the month, we discuss more of the creative side of things. So, what does a game composer do? How does the music serve the game as a whole? How does the music affect the game, and how does the game affect the music? We'll talk about music styles and genres for games and game genres. We'll talk about different thematic ideas and how you can attach music to different ideas or concepts or objects or almost anything in a game. And how does the game know how to play the correct file at the correct time to end up playing exactly what you hear? So basically how they work together, how your music soundtrack interacts with the game and the other way around. We'll also discuss how do you start from a blank slate, either a blank DAW session, or you get hired on a project and they through a series of meetings and discussions, you start narrowing down the overall idea for the music soundtrack and what type of music is going to be heard, what genre, what instrumentation, and make all of those sort of creative choices and really start from nothing and figure out where the music needs to go, how much music you might need, what the production process of that would be, and whether it's completely in the box through electronic instrumentation or sample libraries, or whether it is a hybrid where you're also recording acoustic instruments, or whether it's completely acoustic, more symphonic or orchestral recording. We'll talk about the range of music for games, whether it is more of a smaller mobile game project or an independent game. There's a lot of opportunity in game development, and typically in the beginning stages, you'll start out with smaller and smaller game teams. Smaller game teams that get bigger and bigger and work on bigger projects over time as you pick up games and credits that with projects that you've worked with, and how all of that kind of ties together in the creation of the music soundtrack. It's towards the second half of the month. We will have a discussion of how all of the WAV files, how the music that you've created actually starts getting into the game. What is sort of the technical process? What is some of the software? What are some of the tools that are used in order to get the music set up so that when the player clicks the button on the controller or uses the mouse or keyboard, or they walk through that door and there's a big monster there that requires a whole new set of music, how all of that does that work together, and how does the game even know what to do? Question in the chat is, will we be learning about software such as Fmod and Wwise over the course of the month? Absolutely. That's towards the second half. We will be talking about some of the tools that are most popular out there for the development of the games themselves, and also the audio side of everything. An understanding of the technical process of how your music actually works in the game. A lot of that stuff, Fmod and Wwise are very strong skills to have in the game industry, so that you understand how the music actually is technically functioning in the game. And that is sort of like a musician learning more about their DAW or hardware or software, or learning about the studio. There are certainly musicians, maybe session musicians, that spend their entire life on one side of the glass, just playing their instrument. They are the drummer, they are play the keys, they are the guitarist, the vocalist, whatever it is, and they only worry about the music side of things. But often there are artists or whole bands that want more creative control and want to understand how to get the best sound, how to capture the best performance. They want to learn microphones and studio gear and outboard gear, the DAW, the plugins, and all of the technical side. Music production itself has a creative aspect and a technical aspect. Folks coming through this degree program typically come at it from two sides, where they have musical chops, they have a understanding of theory, they play their instrument, and they want to understand how to better capture their music and create a better, more professional production of their music or their album. And there are folks that come at it from the technical side, where they know DAWs, they know plugins, they know routing and synths, and they are wanting to learn more of the theory side and the actual performance side of it, and how it ties into their production. So the same sort of idea with the creative and technical aspects with a game composer. More than likely, typically when you start out, you are your skills are in the creation of the music, and your responsibilities often end with the delivery of the final music assets, the approved, finished music. And then it's somebody else's job in the game team to take those WAV files and actually put them into the game to make them work. And same sort of idea, where you are entirely in the music side of things and you deliver the WAV files, and then somebody else, it's almost like somebody else mixing your music, where they can put it into the game and it may not end up sounding the way that you expected as the music composer. So you start understanding and learning some of the software like Fmod or Wise to understand how the music is actually going to perform in the game and have some more control over it. It's like somebody wanting it's having nobody else mix your music. You take care of that process and you have more creative control over it. So we'll be hitting on all of these aspects of the creative side and the technical side and how they all tie together, because it's really two halves of the whole project. And so that leads me to a couple of disclaimers here before we really start out about the class overall. The first disclaimer is you don't actually have to be any good at video games to be successful in this class. I certainly know that folks coming through the class have a wide variety of experience with games, and there are folks that are really interested in the game industry, and they play games and they're up on all the newest and latest games and technology and the composers and the developers and how it all works together, and they want to expand and learn more of how to get involved in the industry as a whole. And that is great, and that's awesome, because I can totally chat all day long with you and nerd out with you on all sorts of aspects of the industry, the production, the technical, the creative, the overall composition, how it all works together, and we can talk all day long about that. There's also folks coming through this class that have very little experience with games and haven't been playing games since they were maybe throwing quarters into the arcade machine or playing Minesweeper or chess on their computer or something like that. And that is absolutely fine too. You will still have be able to be equally successful in the class, because your skills at playing a game is really of no importance to the class. Now, we will completely immerse you into the game world, and if you have no games or aren't playing games, we provide you games to play, and we'll be talking about the industry and the technology and how games, what's popular and what's really working, and where the future is headed with the games and music and audio. But you actually getting the highest score or the fastest time or being able to really play the games with any sort of skill is not important, because the skills that are required for the class are the ones that you've been working on all through the degree program, and that is the creation and production of music, specifically for game projects. You will be taking the ideas and the information that's provided and interpreting it into your own musical idea. And so your understanding of music theory and production and recording and composition and all of those aspects of the entire process, mixing and formatting and bouncing and getting everything set up for the final delivery, that is what's important in the class. So it's really still music production and composition. It's just in the context of how it all works in games. So we have game projects to work on all throughout the month. Our Thursday sessions are more towards the industry and what the composer does and how the process works creatively, and then we'll also get into more of the technical side of things later on in the month. So the first disclaimer is you don't actually have to be any good at video games to be successful in the class. The second disclaimer is, a typical question. One of the questions that pops up pretty early on in the month is, do I have to know code? Do I have to be able to program to work as a music composer in the game industry? And that is a no. You do not have to be able to code, but there is a technical aspect to all of this, and you are working on a project that is code. I mean, it is software. It is a game. It plays on a computer. So, but your interface with that code, your actual opening up a text editor and working in that sort of way is not a skill set that is required immediately overall. Now, your understanding of the technology, your understanding of tools like Fmod and Wise, and we'll also talk about this month game engines like the Unity game engine and the Unreal game engine, and how the technology works with your music is a strong skill set to have. And we've had a local here in Orlando, we have EA Sports. We have Tiburon, which is it's a game developer with the EA Sports whole company, and they do Madden and NCAA. Well, they did NCAA, NBA, PGA Tour, some FIFA, some Need for Speed, and the audio director comes by Full Sail to chat with their students every once in a while. And that's a very common question that he gets. Do I have to know code? Do I have to know how to program in order to work in audio for games? And he says the answer is number one, being able, if you can create sounds, do sound design, that is a strong skill set to have. If you can create sounds and you know how to compose music, that is extremely valuable. You understand the how music and theory and the production process work together. That's even more valuable. If you can create sounds, make music, and also code and program, then you're more likely a unicorn, because those people really don't exist all that much. And typically those are skill sets that don't blend together, right? Your programmers are not probably going to be writing your best music. Your music composers are probably not going to be writing your best code. And so there can be a level of interacting with like scripts and doing some scripting, and we'll talk about how all that goes together. But typically those are skills that are learned over the course of your career, and as you work on different projects and how it all connects together. So those are my disclaimers overall, and things to be aware of as we start out the class. Let's see, what other topics do I need to hit on? Let's just talk about the class as a whole. Our Tuesday and Thursday sessions. Our Tuesday classes are more geared towards the weekly assignments. So Sunday night, Monday morning, the assignments are released for the week, and hopefully you've taken the opportunity to go download the first all of week one's assignments, and at least downloaded them and hopefully check them out, and we'll certainly be talking all about that. Towards the second half of our class today, we will be discussing our week one assignments. And so This Tuesday is a little bit different than the rest of our Tuesdays because there is so much. It's the first class, and there's a lot of introductory material that we need to discuss. So, but by next Tuesday, and weeks 2, 3, and 4, you will have turned in your first round of assignments by next Tuesday. So all of your assignments are released on the Sunday at the beginning of the week, and they are due by midnight the following Sunday. So by Tuesday, we can start doing peer review. Absolutely. So you will have turned in your first round of assignments on Sunday, and then that gives us an opportunity to take a listen to them on our Tuesday class. So there is a separate assignment that is an optional assignment called peer review. And this gives you an opportunity to have a little bit of more individual feedback. If you're able to make the Tuesday sessions, then you can ask all sorts of questions, and we will go through the project. There will be a video recording of it and a video review of it. So even if you can't make the live sessions, still submit your project for the peer review, and I will talk my way through it. And doing it on video allows me to point things out and talk about it in a bit more detail. Everybody will get their grade sheet and feedback comments overall, but if you can, please submit it for the peer review. That allows us to take a listen to it, and hopefully we can discuss a few points overall. So that really helps the individual, but as for everybody else, it allows us to see what everybody else is doing in their projects. So it allows us to touch on things and point out, like, this is really good. You should probably be heading towards this sort of idea or approach. Or if we see a lot of people are doing something that doesn't really work out, we can say, hey, you kind of watch out for this and don't go down that path. So definitely take the opportunity to submit your game compositions for peer review. That will start out next Tuesday. So for week 2, 3, and 4. We will start out with a discussion of the new week's assignments and then go back and discuss the previous week's assignments. On Thursday, Thursday is based around the slide presentation, and we have a lot of different topics to discuss. Week 1 is really about jobs in the game industry and how the game industry overall is faring against the music industry and the movie industry, and big dollar numbers, and some we'll talk about how much different aspects of different jobs in the industry are paying, and we have some documentation on that to go over, and really just the role of a game composer and what they do in a game team, who hires you, who you work with, who has approval on and creative control on game projects, and how it all how it all kind of works to get hired on a game project. Then week 2 is really about how do you start from nothing and figuring out what type of music works and where does it work in the game, and how much music you might need for different parts of the game. Then we start getting into some more of the technical aspects of audio middleware and game engines, and how does your music actually work. We'll talk about implementation and the process of getting your music to play back, and the interactive mix that is set up for the game. And then week 4 is really based around, okay, how do I take everything that I've learned, the projects, and start getting involved in the industry? How do you find projects? How do you find clients? How do you find employers? Keeping up on the industry and the news and the tech and all of that sort of stuff. So really, how do you get your foot in the door and get the whole process rolling? So that is our Tuesday and Thursday classes. What else should we talk about? I think that's really everything that we needed to hit on overall. This is me. Again, my name's Chris Latham. I've been with Full Sail for about 13 years now, and started out over in recording arts before there was a music production program, doing the post-production classes, working in the studios, doing studio classes, recording sessions. My background is more in the post-production side of things, uh, commercial work, radio, television, that aspect, before really the game audio industry has really blossomed. So started working in about a decade ago now, and so I've been working on lots of different game projects, and Full Sail got on the game audio train about 7 years ago, and we created a game audio class on campus. And then when the music production degree program came online, I transitioned over here and built the game music composition class. So whatever aspects of the industry are you're interested in, and whether it's the tech and microphones and instruments and gear, or whether it is composition, or certainly games and that part of the industry, we can talk all day long about that. So contact me on email and iChat are going to be the best ways. If I am only at my phone, because Tuesdays and Thursdays I am at home teaching the class. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm at my desk from 1 p.m. till 3 p.m. before I start doing my campus classes. So the phone, you can try giving me a call. If you leave a message, then also send me an email. That way I definitely get it, and I know that you are you're reaching out, and I can address any sort of issues overall. And then from there we can figure out a time to meet and maybe do a go-to training private session and discuss whatever we need. So iChat, email are still the best ways of getting in contact with me. I have a external game audio contracting company called Engine Audio outside of Full Sail, working on all sorts of different stuff, so you can keep up at Engine Audio on Twitter or the Engine Audio webpage, see what is going on, or always release all sorts of different information there. A question, what football game were you working in the lower left-hand corner? This is for an NCAA game. We worked with EA Sports to record some of the stadium ambience and atmosphere, the crowd overall, and the cheering and the boos and all sorts of fun stuff. So this is a LSU Gator game in 2012, something like that. And I went to Florida State for a couple of years, so I am a Florida State Seminoles fan. And that game, the Gators lost to the LSU Tigers, and it was wonderful to record all of the booing and the tears and the whining that when they lost. So yeah, sorry about the Rose Bowl last year. Well, that didn't happen for us, but it was very nice to be on the sidelines, and a lot of cursing also. Which had to be edited out for some reason. So, Oregon fan, very good. So, yes, recording for games and game development. Here's some of the projects I've worked on, and currently working on a game called Depth, which is Sharks versus Divers. It is a multiplayer underwater game where you can be a shark and chomp on some divers, and or the other way around, and steal treasure and gold. So that's a fun game to work on. I worked with EA Sports for a while. Currently working on Madden 17. That's coming out towards the end of the year. And did a very, very little bit for Assassin's Creed. Recorded some cannons for them. But that couple of different projects to work on, and so that is how to contact me, and a little bit about the class. And all right, let me take a quick pause here before we get into our next topic. Hold on just a sec. All right. So, a question here in the chat: what kind of recorders do you use? Mostly sound devices. Sound devices recorders are nice and expensive, unfortunately. So we often rent them. There's a local company, audio rental company, where we can rent all sorts of microphones and recorders. But sound devices, 702s, 722s, 788s. Actually on that session we used a Fostex FR2 as on one of the microphones, and we also used H4 recorder plugged in with an external preamp. So a full range of stuff, right? The H2s and the H4s are, and the H6 now, are really good recorders and a much better price than the sound devices. Unfortunately, I have not convinced my wife to allow me the $2 or $3 or whatever it is to throw down on a sound devices. But Full Sail has some that we use every once in a while, or else we rent them. But that's typically the industry standard these days, are sound devices. Or if you can get your hands on a Nagra recorder, that was even more expensive. All right. Also here in the chat. Is an understanding of location recording techniques required in the game industry? Well, it depends on what aspect of the industry you want. Field recordists can be really quite valuable. We work with a guy called Watson Wu, who is a really great sound recordist and very well known in the industry. And he recently did Need for Speed, and we recorded some weapons for a South Korean company for a Ghost in the Shell game. I don't know if you remember or have ever watched the Ghost in the Shell anime, but it's still a very popular product in South Korea, and they're making a first-person shooter out of it. And they can't own any weapons in South Korea. And so where do you go to record a whole bunch of weapons? But we went out to the deserts of Nevada and recorded massive amounts of firearms and weaponry. So if you like to be outside and blow stuff up and crash cars and not crash cars and record really awesome racing cars and weapons and vehicles and all that sort of stuff, a lot of those big games have their own unique sound library that are built directly and only for that game and require teams of field recordists to record and capture all of that stuff. So again, it's just another skill set to have. I mean, are you going to be the best composer, sound designer, field recordist, dialogue recordist ever? Probably not, right? There's a whole bunch of skills and techniques and gear that takes, and when you get to a really professional level, people often kind of burrow down and get really into their one aspect of the industry overall. But it's another set of skills to have. And this kind of goes towards, and may even be more necessary in the earlier parts of your career, where you are working with game teams that are very small and kind of bare bones, where you are just the audio person. You're not the game composer. You're just the audio person in general. You do music and sound effects and maybe record effects and do dialogue. Maybe you are the voiceover talent, or maybe you have other voiceover artists. But a lot of times in the beginning, you aren't just the music composer. You are the audio person, and you do all aspects of the audio. And even more so, a lot of game teams don't really know what they want for audio. They're like, we hired you. You said you're so smart about audio. You figure it all out. We don't know what we want. And then it's like, well, there's more creative control because you can have make it go in all sorts of directions. But people often don't know. They can't tell you what they want, but they'll tell you when they hear it, right? I don't like that, or I do like that. And so it's all about interpreting their crazy, weird ideas into actual, real audio and music. So any of those skill sets to have will certainly make you more valuable, and you will probably get a lot of on-the-job training working as the sole audio person for a game project where you just kind of have to figure it out. And that gives you a lot of fun things to play with, and is a great way of building your skill set. So, goals for the class. Number one, of course, is to write music. That's why we're here. That's why you are here through the entire program. So we will be generating more music and creating things to build out your portfolio or demo reel. So all of your games, you will be creating the entire unique soundtrack, music and sound effects for that game, and understanding how to deliver music for game projects in all sorts of different styles. Number two is play video games. I have a very important concept in this class, which is called game research. And game research means you should be playing video games, right? You should be paying attention to the music and paying attention to the sound effects. If people ask you why you're playing more video games this month, you say, I am doing game research. And you continue playing the video game. This actually, for very realistic reasons, if you are interested in the music industry, then you should be listening to tons of music. You should be paying attention to what is popular and what is selling well, or what's not popular, and what's good and bad, and what's who the best artists are, and the producers and the composers and the engineers and the record labels and the studios and how they created the music and the entire industry as a whole. You should be paying attention to all aspects, not just the one genre or thing that you are solely focused on. You should understand how it all works together. If you are interested in the film industry, you want to be a film composer, you should be paying attention to, we should be watching tons of movies, paying attention to the credits, who is the director, who's the producer, what is the production company creating that film, who is the composer, what studios did they record the soundtrack at, how did they do it, any sort of behind the scenes or interviews that you can gain access to. And the same thing goes for the game industry. It just happens to be video games. So you should be playing a lot of video games and paying attention to the games. And yes, they're all fun and good to play as video games, but pay attention to the audio and the music. Find ones you love and find ones you hate. And why does the music work or not work in all of this? Who's the composer? Who are the game developers? Who are the game publishers, the game studios? How does it all work together, and just keep up on the industry as a whole. So if you don't have any video games, we give you video games to play. If you have video games, then play video games. I still get this in the office, right? I'm playing a video game, doing some like taking notes and capturing different things for my class, and I get people coming across my desk like looking at me funny because I'm playing video games in my office. But they don't teach game composition, so they don't have to play video games. Writing music and playing video games. And the last one, with all of this fun music and games, there is a lot of learning. There is a lot of knowledge and a lot of material involved in all of this. There is the industry as a whole is a smaller industry. There's a lot of opportunity in it because there's can be a sizable learning curve at certain points in the process, and gaining all of the skills that are involved in working in games. And so there is a lot of material and a lot of concepts to cover overall. So we'll be hitting on all of that stuff as we go through the month. So let's start talking about the assignments for week 1 and how they are going to work. So our first one here is how are you successful in this class? That is, don't fail, right? And that's That's easily said, and certainly not difficult to do, because you can. There's a lot of resources available to help you through the process. So the real concept behind this is, how are you successful in this class? And the step number one is download everything at the very beginning of the week. Download it on Monday when it's all released, and take a look at all of the PDFs. Play the games. That's a big one. So let me I'll do a weekly poll here in the chat. Give me a yes or a no. Have you downloaded all of the assignments for this week? And have you played our first game, which is called 2D Platformer? Take this opportunity to download and play the games. So let me know if the game has worked for you, and if you have any sort of issues. Everything, all of the games are software, so there can be some technical issues every once in a while. I typically have a very high success rate of getting everything to work properly in the class, but it is software, it is technology. Depending on your computer and operating systems and what you have installed, there's all sorts of reasons that things might not work, but most of the time they'll work directly off the bat. And so I just need to know that you download everything and you get it installed, or not installed, you just play the games as early as possible, and take a look at all of the assignments so that you run into any issues as soon as you can. Opening everything or working on it, just like downloading and checking everything out the weekend at the very end, makes it a little bit more difficult. I'm not going to be available on Saturday or Sunday. We can figure anything out after the fact. I don't want any sort of technical issues to get in the way of you being successful in this class. So we will troubleshoot and go through any steps that we need to fix the issue. So after you've downloaded and worked on the assignment, the second way of being successful in this class is to work on the revisions. Every week, you are given an opportunity to revise your previous week's assignments. So towards the end of week 2, you will have the opportunity to submit anything from week 1, your game composition, your production technique, or your technical assignment. And we'll talk about what all those assignments are. But so you'll turn everything on Sunday, and then through the week I will grade and return back grade sheets and comments on the 3 main assignments each week. And then you can take those and make any changes to those assignments, and that will not only will improve the grade overall, so that then after that I will go back through and grade the revisions and update the grades. So not only will it improve that side, but really what we're trying to do is improve your projects, improve the game compositions. I can't really expect that you're going to knock it out of the park the first time every single time. And so there's always a process of revision and feedback. The music that I create and send off to a client isn't the final version every single time. A lot of times it's not. So there's a process of a back and forth. They say, hey, we want it to sound like this. And you say, okay, here's some music like this. And they say, yeah, kinda. We want more of this and less of that. And you go, okay, what about this? And they say, yay, that's really awesome. Or no, tweak it some more. And it's back and forth. So there's a revision process each week. The people that have most success in this class do the revisions because some of the assignments are just cut and dry. Like you didn't bounce it in this format, or you didn't name it in a certain way, or there's some aspect of the assignment that you didn't follow. Well, okay, here's what you need to do, and here's the changes. You make those changes, and it swings the grades back in a positive direction. Same thing with your composition. I point out things on the technical side, I point out things on the compositional, creative side, and then you go back and you make those changes and it updates the project overall. So definitely take the opportunity to make those changes to the projects. All right, so let's get into the assignments for the week and our first game. That's definitely one we want to talk about here. Hold on, let me take another quick pause before we get into this. All right. So, this is a weekly breakdown of your grades, or the percentage of each one of the assignments. Your game composition each week is going to be your largest assignment and most involved, and your technical assignment and the production technique are kind of based off of that game composition. Taking the technical assignments are taking some aspect of the music that you create and doing something technical with it. Where this week it is all about looping looping your music. I'm sorry, no. This first week, that's your production technique. This first week, your technical assignment is delivery of your audio files, formatting the files correctly, and bouncing them out in multiple formats. And your production technique this week is looping music, is taking audio files or MIDI and creating seamless loops. Looping files are extremely important in games and are going to they are the technique that allows music to extend on for a very long time before it changes off into something else. How do you make a piece of music that is going to play for either a short amount of time or an endlessly long amount of time? Well, you use a loop so that it goes around and around. And you want to make this as invisible as possible so that the player doesn't know that they are in a loop and they can't hear when that loop starts over again. So looping techniques are very important. Your technical assignment for week 2 and week 3 will be doing all of the sound effects for your first series of games. In week 1, you will do the music for your first game, and then in week 2, you'll do all the sound effects for that game. Week 2, you'll do the music for your second game, and then in week 3, you'll go back and do all the sound effects for that second game. Each week there's a 20-question quiz. Those are based off of the slides and the Thursday session. So you might want to wait until then to complete the quiz. Or you can take a look at it and see if you have any questions and complete as much as you can, and then see if you have any questions, ask questions in the Thursday session. We can work our way through those. And then there's a discussion question this first week that is a pretty open-ended question of what games do you play? What's your experience with games? What's your favorite game? What's a favorite musical experience with game? So we'll just kind of gives me a sense overall of the class and everybody's understanding of games. All right, so let's take a look at your first game project. Well, we'll take a look at all of the games in each of the weeks, and then we'll talk more specifically here about 2D platformer. So let me bring up for the horde. Awesome. Um, so 2D platformer, bring this down, and cool. So here is a 2D platformer. 2D platformer is made by Unity Games, right? If you play a lot of mobile games, you might recognize this logo or have seen Unity Games somewhere. They create the Unity game engine, and that game engine is the technology that powers a lot of games, especially mobile games. And so it's a very popular system, and if you play Android games or iOS games, you might see this logo pop up as you begin or start the game. Here in the chat, Edward, are there other games like this that we can compose and design the sounds for outside of the games in this class? Yes, we will talk about, when we get into more of the technical side, we will talk about the Unity game engine, and we'll talk about the Unreal game engine. And both of those, one of the great things about all of the software that we talk about in this class is that it is all free. And it is all free to download and learn, and for educational purposes, and excuse me, and non-commercial reasons, and even some commercial projects can use this game software for free. And so you can go to the go to unity3d.com, and you can download the Unity game engine, and there are tutorials and game projects. They have something called the Asset Store, which is kind of like the App Store, but it's allows you to download material and games and projects. And the Unreal engine is just like that also. You go to unrealengine.com, and you can download it and download games and projects and all sorts of stuff. So we'll be talking more about that towards the end of the month, but definitely download it and check it out, because yeah, there's all sorts of things out there that there are fully working games that you can then change all the WAV files and do sound effects and music and all sorts of stuff. That's where 2D Platformer came from. I downloaded it from the Asset Store. It is made by Unity Games, and it's really a demo to show off their technology. Excuse me. It is in the style of what is known as a 2D platform game. That's why it is called 2D Platformer. And what that means, platform games are based in the lineage of Super Mario Brothers or Mega Man or Donkey Kong or Contra or something like that, where it is the main purpose is running and jumping and shooting or punching or something like that, and there are always enemies that you need to get around or get by or defeat, and it's a 2D game because it really just moves left and right. It doesn't it's not a 3D environment to move through. So the game itself is a pretty wacky, silly game. The game is set in London. You can see here, this is the London, there's an alien invasion, and the alien invasion, this is the London Bridge that has fallen down, and here's Big Ben that's all broken, and the London Eye as they've blown that up. And so, for whatever reason, you are a bean with a monocle and a mustache and a top hat and a bazooka. And you are going to defend the London from the alien invasion. And so it's an absolutely ridiculous concept, but it's a whole lot of fun little game to get us started, because the scope of what the game needs is pretty light overall. So I here in the chat, anyone else remember Toe Jam and Earl? Yeah, kind of in that style. Rayman series of games were kind of like that too at points. And so the musical soundtrack for this game, number one, I leave the style open to you, the instrumentation and the genre up to you, but it is probably has it's wacky and silly, and it's probably meant for kid friendly or all ages. So nothing too dark and menacing or depressing or anything like that. Keep it light and fun. But the genre and the instruments that you use and the overall style of it is on you. The rest of our games through the month are going to be more. You're given more information about or more direction in the way to head with the style and the instruments. So this one I leave a bit more open overall. So let me jump over here. And I'll jump back to the video in just a sec. But this is the PDF that describes the game, and it describes in text form a lot of the stuff that I'm saying. And there's a game overview, talks about, there's unity3d.com, talks about where the game came from, Super Mario Brothers, Donkey Kong, somebody mentioned Metroid, absolutely. More modern games, Limbo, Braid, and Jetpack Joyride are kind of in this style, if anybody's checked those out. Musical style, I mentioned Monty Python meets Mars Attacks, Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers, so something ridiculously silly and maybe British, and maybe also a little bit of alien invasion and maybe a theremin in there, or some sort of synthy element. How do you play? Left and right, left arrow, right arrow, spacebar to jump. Left click will fire the bazooka, and right click will drop the bombs. You can pick up bombs and drop them. It is important to say that all of our games this month are not full games, meaning that they are kind of like a slice or a sliver of a much larger game. They are one level of a game. They are one part of a much larger game. But they are smaller so that they are in the scope of things that we can accomplish 1 week at a time. They each have a different musical approach. Yes, each one of the games and assignments, your final result is going to be delivering WAV files, but how those WAV files work in the game and what style and your overall musical approach will be different from month to month. The overall instrumentation, like I said, I leave that up to you, but it definitely needs to have drums, bass, harmony, and melody. And that should be more than just 4 instruments. There should be a couple of instruments making up the harmony, and either one lead melody or a couple of lead instruments that maybe trade off the melody. Definitely drum and a rhythm track. This is really what I'm getting at here. The asset list. An asset list is very important in the creation of all of your audio. Number one, it is how you get paid, because it is a list of all of the audio that everybody agrees that if you deliver this many sounds, then we will pay you this much money. And so this is a list of all of the sounds that need to be created. And so for this game, you will create a total of 9 WAV files. Each one of these WAV files I referred also as a cue. So according to the different parts of the game, you'll hear me refer to the different musical cues. There's 3 intro cues, there are 3 main loop cues, and there are 3 ending cues. So the way this game works is it is based off of variation and repetition. So you have 3 intro cues. They are each going to be 2 bars long, and they are going to be, the WAV files are going to be bounced out as 16-bit 44:1 stereo files. It's a pretty common format. So 2-bar intros. Let me do this. Open up another Logic session here. I got some demos. Let's see. Week 1. Game composition. Demos. Here we go. So, let me pop back here real quick. 3 2-bar intros, 3 8-bar main loops, and 3 2-bar endings. So these are 4 different student projects. And each one of these, we have 3 main loops, 3 8-bar main loops. Just organize this so we can listen to some of these in a sec. 3 2-bar intros, and 3 2-bar endings. All right, so like I said, we'll just do it this way. Nine files. Get this all set up here. Probably even take this in a little closer. Okay, so I'm gonna unmute this. The way the game works here is when the game starts, right here, soon as Mr. Bean here drops down, the 2-bar intros start playing. The game randomly chooses, it picks a number 1 through 3, and it randomly chooses one of these 3 2-bar intros. And the intros are meant to create a build or a rise, create a build of an anticipation before dropping into the main loops. So for, I don't know, about that long or so, there's a 2-bar intro playing. That intro only plays once, and then once it's done, the game will randomly choose one of these 8-bar main loops to play. So it'll start playing from the beginning. We'll listen to these in just a sec, but it'll start playing from the beginning, and it will play all the way through its 8 bars. Once it reaches the end of its 8 bars, then really the game doesn't even understand that it's 8 bars. It doesn't understand the time or the tempo or anything about your music. It just waits until the file is done, waits until the wave file is over. Once that is done, then it randomly chooses another file, and it plays that for 8 bars. And then once that is done, it randomly chooses another one, and then it can go back. Maybe it plays the same one again, right? It goes all the way through this this third one here, and then it plays it through again. And it can just randomly choose any one of these 3 8-bar loops to play, and it plays all the way through them to create the main soundtrack. So these main loops need to all feel like they are from the same song. They are different parts of the same song. You can think of it as part A, B, and C, or part A and A'1 and A'2, or just 3 different variations on a similar idea. So that means that each one of these is going to be the same tempo, it's going to be the same key, it's going to have the same instrumentation, the same drums, the same bass, harmony, and melody instrumentation. So there's going to feel like a similar song played by the same band, and the thing that's going to change and that's going to vary from one to the next is your composition, especially your melody. The melody is going to be the strongest change from one to the next, or it's going to provide most of the voice of that particular cue. Changes in your drum pattern, maybe you switch up the hi-hat pattern a bit, change up the kick-snare pattern, bass line changes up a little bit, chord progression and the harmonies change up. Everything doesn't have to change every single time, but there should be some noticeable changes and variations in each one of the cues. So, the game plays, and for most of the gameplay, it will choose main loop 2, and then play that for 8 bars, and then it'll choose main loop 3 and play that for 8 bars, and then it'll choose main loop 3 again and play that for 8 bars, then it'll go back to 2, and then it'll go to 1, and just whatever random order it plays through all of them. And as long as they're in time, in the same key and tempo, and they will always feel like they come from the same song because they're played back to back to back. So, the ending cues. At some point, you you lose all of your health points. There's a little health bar at the top here. And if you get hit enough, you lose enough health points, you lose a life, you die, and you kind of fall off the edge. And you can also lose all of your health by getting hit by the enemies, or you can just walk off of the edge and lose a life like that. And so how does the game know how to go from all these main loops? It's constantly randomly choosing one, and then goes off to the ending. Well, if you lose all of your health points, then it immediately transitions into one of these three endings. It does not wait, doesn't care where you are at some random point in these different bars. It will just immediately cut into the new piece of music. And that works because same thing happens when you die in the game. You immediately lose control, you can't do anything, and the game kind of shifts very suddenly. So it works with the music. So let's take some time here and listen to some examples. That's enough of me talking about everything. Hold on. Let's get this out of the way. And oops. I stopped. Where am I? Hold on. A lot of Chris. Darn it. Shrink that down. Put me back over here. Yeah, it's better. Okay. And we will go. Where will we go? Logic. Okay. So we got 4 examples. I don't know if we'll play all 4 of them, but we'll take a listen to some things and point them out. Let's do this. Bring these back together. I'm going to start by playing the main loops because that gives us a sense of what everything should kind of sound like, and then we'll go to the intros and endings to see how it ties into those main loops. Oh, where did I go again? I disappeared. There we go. So, with these main loops, notice that all of these are looping. There's no gaps at the end of the files. The music extends across the full 8 bars of each one of the cues. You want to make sure that they loop. You don't want any silence or gaps or pops or clicks or anything that would prevent a smooth loop. They are all quite loud in their dynamics. Overall, you should kind of fill up the meter with the final mix. You certainly don't want to clip or have any peaks that go over 0, and your average level should be somewhere around -6. But you certainly want to make sure that your music is not so low that it's going to be masked by everything else in the mix, and not so loud that it would completely overload or distort. So let's take a listen here. Let's do this. Bring this one up, bring this one down, and start here. I guess I should ask, can you hear that? Can you hear the music and still hear me, and it's all working together? Okay. So we have the drums and the tuba and the marimba part. Notice when it reaches the end, it loops back around seamlessly. Let's jump to the next one. Now you're going to hear a slight variation. Percussion might change, marimba part changes, tuba part changes. Here the melody is a bit stronger overall, but it still kind of repeats. We'll go to the third one here. Here it's works a lot better to develop out over the cue. There's a lot more movement. You want to make sure that your melody is strong. Does change and vary through the cue. All right, so and this can constantly roll around. Doesn't matter where I jump. It always makes sense as it transitions from one to the next. Let's go to the intros. The intros are meant to create a build or a rise heading into the main loops. All right, so you get a sense that everything's kind of climbing up, the percussion and all of the instrumentation kind of heads towards resolving back to the one or back on the downbeat of the main loops. It can often kind of hang on the 4 or the 5 before it resolves back to the 1 at the beginning. Now watch out for things like this where there's a crash cymbal. That crash cymbal gets cut off at the end, so you don't want to have anything that's going to decay over to the next cue. That will cause issue. We'll talk about how to get around that, but so something to initially watch out for. The ending cues. Here, now the endings are kind of the opposite of the intros, where they're meant to end or resolve the music to a finale or to end with silence. Right, so everything often has a downward direction, and everything ends up back on that 1, typically back on the tonic, so that it has this strong resolution. You want to make sure that everything ends before the file gets cut off. Notice how things get chopped off at the end of the file. Right, there's a little bit of reverb and some cymbal decay in there that gets cut off. Unlike something like these, this looks a little better, like it doesn't get cut off. These look a little better. This looks good. This almost looks like it gets cut off. So watch out for the endings of the file. You want to make sure everything, reverb and decay, has enough time to finish. Let's try another one here. Let's do this one. This one is a little more electronic, synthy, which is another way of going. Bring this down. I'll actually bring this down. And yeah. All right, so we have a lead that develops through the cue. It does repeat a little bit. We got the same phrase here, a little change at the end. Let's try the next one. This one's got an arpeggiator. You can tell a change and a difference from the previous cue. Right here, the rhythm kind of goes halftime, gives another feel to the music. And each one of those is set up to loop. Let's jump over here. So again, no pops, no clicks, no fades, nothing to really feel like it interrupts the music. Intros. Now these are not strong intros at all. They kind of an example of something to avoid. This doesn't really feel much like an intro. Mainly because it just stays at one level. Doesn't feel like it rises and rises. An intro, if you set it to loop, it'll feel like it builds, 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 and then drops back down. It builds and builds and builds and drops back down. But here, this feels like a 2-bar loop. It just feels like it just sits there and goes around and around, right? This one's, oops, not the loop library. This is not much better. This is a little bit better because it's got the snare roll at the end, but that's not, I mean, snare roll works, drum kind of fill or roll at towards the end to create anticipation helps, but you should also use all of the melodic and harmonic instrumentation. Your endings and your intros should contain all of the instruments that your main loops have, right? If you have drums, bass, harmony, and melody, all of those should be used also in the intros and endings. You can't just have the lead synth in the intros or just drums or something like that. You should use all of the instrumentation that helps it transition from one to the next. Endings. Let's try that again. All right, these work. Feel a little similar in parts, but they've got some change to them, and they do end. They hit and end on the beginning of the second bar, and that gives them enough time to resolve. Let's do one more. We'll jump down here and do this. Main loop 1. Whoa, loud. Sorry about that. Let's turn it down. All right, so drums, we got a strong lead line. The lead line changes through the cue. Definitely more synth than the rest of the cues. Some effects to the lead line. You can hear changes to certainly the lead. You can hear changes to the rhythm and the progression. Those are more kind of EDM build-ups and intros, which have some interesting effects and could work depending on the style. And endings. It's got some good sounds in here. All right, that's more of an ending that kind of dissolves into effects, whether it's a pitch stop or a whatever that was, filter and delay. All right, so if you have any questions, please post those up, and that hopefully gives you some good examples and ideas for the direction of your composition. A couple of things here I want to hit on. Where'd it go? Maybe it's back here. There it is. Couple things. Compose interesting loops. Looping does not mean repetitive. One of the main things that, one of the issues that I come into contact with is that it's an 8-bar loop, but it is the same thing in the first 4 bars and the second 4 bars. It's really a 4-bar loop that goes twice. Or even worse, it's a 2-bar loop that goes 4 times. So use the entire 8 bars to develop your melody and your entire musical thought. An 8-bar loop is going to loop enough, right? As it rolls through main loop 1, 2, and 3, each are only 8 bars long. It gets repetitive on its own. So you want to make sure that you use the entire 8 bars to create your melodic idea. You want to make sure that everything loops and transitions fluidly. So you want to make sure consistency is a very important idea, where the instrumentation maintains from one cue to the next. Same keys, same revolving around a similar musical progression will help maintain that consistency. Same thing with tempo, maintaining a tempo. It's not really an easy thing to go off to another tempo or time signature in 8 bars and return back without any sort of place for it. Continuous loops, no pops or gaps or pops or clicks or anything like that. Overall mix, you want a high signal to noise ratio. That's typically the main thing. You want to almost fill up the meter with your peak level, and your average level will be around -6 or 9 or something like that. Never mind, answer the question. Let's see. What was the question? Should there be noticeable cadence between the end of one loop to the start of the next one? Nope. You're going to maintain that full 8 bars all the way from one to the next. Your cadence is really going to be in your endings. Putting your music in the game. Here's something to definitely take advantage of. And that is actually testing your music working in the game. Here's the actual application, 2D platformer. And you can right-click on the icon and do Show Package Contents. And inside of Contents is a folder called Data. And inside of Data is a folder called Streaming Assets. And there you will find 2 folders that you will be very familiar with, one called Music and one called Sound Effects. And in these folders, we'll just do Music here, you'll notice here are the 9 files that you will have created, right? So 3 main loops, 3 intros, and 3 endings. If you take your audio files and you place them in this location, right? Just go follow this section, follow the screenshot here. Place your files in the correct location. The next time you play the game, it will play your music. So you will hopefully run into any sort of issues when you play back and test it. And then you can go back and make the changes before you deliver everything. So definitely take the chance to test it out, play the game as quick as soon as you can, and get a sense for the musical direction that you're going to go. If you have any sort of issues, please contact me and we'll work our way through them. Here in the chat, does the game work on PC? The one that we have does not. It is a Mac game. But the software can build a PC version of the game. And so we'll talk about the Unity engine, which is what all of your games are made from, the software that's used to make the games. And with that Unity software, you could actually make a PC version of all of this. It would take some doing and understanding the game itself, but it's certainly possible. All right, let's see. The rest of your games. In week 2, you will be working on a game called Angry Bots. And Angry Bots is a third-person shooter. It's a much more futuristic style to the game overall. There's robots and guns and shooting and explosions, and you're this mercenary that's infiltrating the robot factory, and they don't really like you, and so they're going to attack. And this game, the entire focus is on the idea of ambient and action. And lots of games revolve around this idea where parts of the game you're just wandering around aimlessly trying to figure out what the next part of the game is. And then you turn around the corner and then there's all sorts of bad guys and it immediately switches over to the action or battle mode. So our game heavily revolves around this where you're going to be fighting with a couple of different types of robots. And so we will create music for each one of those different encounters. So this game is much more modern production style, synths and samplers and drum machines and effects processors, way more maybe works with an electronics score or epic orchestral or metal or something like that. Big and fast and loud and strong, and will work very well for the overall design of the game. And then we throw away all of the synths and effects processors and drum machines and Our week 3 game is an open world fantasy game. So it is a completely orchestral instrumentation, acoustic orchestral instruments for this particular game. So we'll talk about an open world fantasy game and how do you build a soundtrack for a game where you have no clue all what direction the player is going to go and in all the different ways that they can play through the game. So different styles of games, different approaches to how the music works. And our production technique for this week is a looping assignment. Now, looking at my clock here, it says it is 5 p.m., and I know that I set the class up to go from 3:30 to 5. But I sometimes, or can often, go over because I'm chatting about stuff and questions, and I can go off in tangents and whatnot. So if you can't stick around, I completely understand, but I am going to continue on with more concepts here from your assignment. So sometimes when I hit 5 o'clock, then certainly with your, like when we're doing peer review and all that, I certainly don't want to cut anybody off. So we will definitely work on all of it. But yep, just a heads up that. Oh, and if you can't make it for this one or all of them or whatever, I post up the archives the next day, or next day online. And that'll show up as in your inbox as an FSO announcement. So definitely take advantage of that. All right, so let's talk about your production technique this week, which is, let's see here. Let's get rid of the notes. Oh, come on. Sorry, I gotta wait for contact here. Your production technique this week is creating a series of loops. And looping music, as I said, is very important for a game because it allows you to extend out the lengths of the soundtrack for as long as is needed. So creating loops, whether from audio files or from MIDI, is an important skill to have because a lot of music for games is not composed or created with a particular part of the game in mind. I say that with kind of hesitation because it comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, but often can be the case where you create music at one point, and then as more and more of the game is developed, you take the music that you created and chop it and edit it and loop it and figure out how to actually make it fit for the game. So a couple of different looping techniques will help you out in all of your compositions. Exactly. Here in the chat, will we be doing this with our main loop music cues? Absolutely. The techniques that you go through in this looping assignment will affect all of your game compositions because every single one of your game compositions has looping music. So we definitely want to talk about these kind of techniques pretty early on in the month so that you can use them all for your game compositions. So the logic session is provided with the assignment, and when you open it up, there is 3 parts, and these are folder tracks, and with each one of these parts, they correspond to a different part of the assignment. Along with the assignment, there is a PDF, a 65-slide PDF that goes through step by step and talks about all of the different parts of this assignment and how it all works together. And this is kind of what I'll be discussing here. But it goes through it in a bit more detail and step-by-step instructions on how to complete everything. So if you haven't ever worked with folder tracks, you double-click on that particular part on the first track, and it dumps you into another part where you can work kind of separately from the overall composition. Then there's this up arrow back at the top that allows you to go back, and you double click and you go in, and you go up and you go back, and you go double click and you go back in. And you have the different sections of the assignment to work on. So this first part, or the first technique here, sorry, get up here, is editing previously existing audio, right? Creating loops out of audio tracks. And you may have done this before. This is very common in music. But editing loops, which is also known as topping and tailing, will allow you to take stuff that already exists and conform it to work in the game. So there's an edit track, and I always suggest you hold down Option, you just drag it down to your edit track. That way, if you completely screw this up, you can go back to the original. And this particular piece of music, and the assignment requires you to edit out 3 different loops. You're going to edit out low intensity, medium intensity, and high intensity. So if I listen here, I get this. If I listen over here, there's more stuff. If I listen over here, there's even more stuff. All right, so you want to be able to edit out a loop. So all you're going to do is find, it's known as topping and tailing. So you're going to find the top of the loop, the beginning of the loop, and the tail, and then you're just going to edit and create your loop. All right, so we listen. This piece of music is relatively straightforward because there's a crash cymbal at the downbeat of each one of these. All right, so there's the beginning of our loop that we want to use. There's a crash cymbal. And what we're going to do is we're going to find the beginning and find the downbeat, and then zoom way in and find a 0 crossing point so that there's not going to be any pops as this loops around. So we find the best place to make our edit, and we hit S to split it, and we have the beginning of our loop. And then we listen. I think these are 4-bar phrases before the next cue, or the next crash. All right, there's our crash again. So we zoom way in here, and this is the end of our loop, or the tail, and we find another good 0 crossing point, and we split it. And that's it. This is editing audio to create your loop. If I loop this, cycle, and listen. With heavily rhythmic music, it hides the loop easily, even more so with a crash cymbal in there. Right? So that's all you have to do, is you edit out the 3 of them. You delete that. You don't need that. You'd eventually delete that. Of course, you need part 2 and 3, but you'd edit out all 3 of your loops. Find the beginning, find the downbeat, split it, find the end, find the downbeat, split it. And that is going to be the first part, and creating loops from previously existing audio. Hopefully that is nothing too mind-blowing. Again, I just hit the up arrow here to move back out of the folder. You might have done that process before. So we'll go to part 2 here, double-click, and here is a whole bunch of MIDI. We have 2 MIDI parts. The first is more of an electronic loop. The second one is more of an orchestral loop. So we'll go over here, we'll listen to this. All right, and so we got our 4-bar phrase there, and we're ready to bounce this out. Now, if we listen to this, there is a lot going on in this loop. Number one, there's a crash over here, and that crash is heard when it loops around. We also hear reverb and delay and the decay of the crash. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes across the end of this edit. So if we bounce this out in a normal way, where we set up our marquee to go to 193 to 197, we'll bounce this. We'll do apple bounce, apple B. We'll do a wave file, 16-bit 44.1, beginning and the end. We'll just do an offline bounce, and we'll hit OK. And it bounces, and I've done this a couple of times. We'll do electronic. We want to replace, yes. I don't think I added that. Let me do this. Apple bounce. I want to add to the project. Yes, 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 yes. You know, let me do it electronic again. Can you replace it? Very good. All right. So we bounce that, and I go to bin here, and I want a new audio track. So I go audio 1, yes, and I take this and I place it on my audio track in my super small resolution here. All right, here's my audio. There's electronic loop. Mute these out. And now I listen to just this. But listen to the crash at the end. It gets cut off every single time, and the reverb and delay, that gets cut off too. I mean, granted, it's there in the bounce, but there's a lot of reverb and delay and this crash symbol that gets cut off at the end of the file, and now I have a very unnatural loop. So that's no good. That doesn't actually sound what my original MIDI sounded like. So we'll try to bounce this again, and this technique that the assignment takes you through is how do you capture a loop, and how do you prevent things from getting cut off? How do you bounce a MIDI loop seamlessly so that anything at the end also gets captured inside of the loop? So what you're going to do here is you're going to take all of the MIDI data, you're going to hold down Option, and you're going to double it up. You're just going to double the length of everything. Then you're going to change the loop, the beginning and the end, change the marquee so that it's twice as long, and then all we're going to do is bounce it out, double the length of the original one. So I hit Apple Bounce, Apple B, Wave 16-bit, add to project, yes, 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 offline. And this one I will call Electronic 2. Yes. So, nothing too weird so far. But I go back in here and I take Electronic 2 and I drag it on a track. I'm going to mute out all this stuff. And what I'm going to do is come halfway through, exactly at 197. I'm bar 197, and I split this file, and I delete the first half, and I only use the second half. And this is one of the most common things that you're going to do in, like you said, the main loop files and in all the rest of the composition in throughout this month. This way, if you have anything that decays over the end, listen to this crash symbol. You'll actually hear it like a phantom crash symbol at the beginning, but it will tie through back from the end back to the front. Muted, yes. So the symbol that was cut off at the end here is actually captured at the beginning, because this first version of it played the crash symbol, it got cut off, but it got captured in the beginning half of the second. So when it loops around, you don't get that symbol cut off every single time. Also, that maintains the reverb and the delay and everything every time it loops around. So what I did here is, loops. I took all of the MIDI data and I doubled it out, and then I bounced it, and then I split it in half, and I deleted the first half. And then I only used the second half. And this is going to allow you to capture any sort of instrument crash cymbal, decay, delay or reverb, or anything that gets cut off. The same thing over here with this orchestral loop. There's instrumentation that the natural decay of the instrumentation will get cut off here at the end. So you want to make sure that this loop will be as seamless as possible, and you'll use the same technique. And then the third one here, part 3. This is how do you make something loop that is really difficult to loop. Like this. Let's do this. Nope. Try again. Okay. This. This is a cool sound, a cool drone pad kind of thing. And it would work as a base layer to maybe one of our compositions, and we want to add some percussion on top or some other elements. But we want to add this as a looping layer. And you could probably sit here a long time and try to make a perfect loop out of this. I did not sit there a long time, but this is very difficult to loop. There's a lot of changes in the timbre and the pitch and the volume of all sorts of stuff. So let's see how well I did with my very bad loop. Right? It's very obvious whenever it loops around. And you could spend a whole lot more time, and you could probably get it pretty good. But it takes a while, and there's some easy techniques to make stuff like this loop. This only works on non-rhythmic material. Only really works well on pads and drones and ambiances. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to take this file. We're just going to make a copy of it. I'll mute the original one. This way we can mess with this one. And I'm going to find 2 random points. Now, the thing to notice here is that I kind of do this blindly. I don't really entirely need to pay attention to how it all works. Now, of course, in your session, in your context, you might want to pay more attention to exactly where everything loops. But the important thing is I can kind of just randomly pick a point here and there, delete the first half and the second half, and try to make this loop. So then I go into some random middle part of the file, and I split this file in half, and I take the first part and I drag it over here past the second. Not all the way over, but I'm going to actually overlap it here somewhere in the middle. All right, and by doing that, I've made the outside edges perfect and seamless, because they were seamless while they were here in the middle at some random point where I split it. So all I did was flip the 2 sides, and now I'm positive the outside edges work. If I highlight both of these and try to loop this, now you'll notice this middle part will be all messed up, but the edges will work. You hear a big jump there. So the middle part is messed up, but the edges are fine. So all I need to do is go to my fade tool and do a big fat crossfade across the middle. Make that nice and seamless. And now we'll take a listen, and it'll be a seamless loop all the way across. The part that was messed up in the middle, one of these fades out, the other one fades in over such a slow amount of time that it becomes invisible. And then, like we said, the edges were already perfect because they came from the same file. So again, what I did here is I chopped off, oops, I chopped off the beginning, chopped off the end, deleted those, went in the middle and split it, took the left side and dragged it past the right side, not entirely, but just overlapped the middle, and then crossfaded. And that creates a seamless loop from... Now, if this was rhythmic material, if this was a drum loop, I would have completely messed up the rhythm. So it doesn't work with rhythmic material, but it works with drones and pads and stuff like that. So 3 different techniques in creating loops: audio editing, bouncing MIDI loops, making loops out of really strange pads and drones. Different approaches that will work for all of your compositions through the month. And lastly, the technical assignment has you bouncing files out in multiple different formats. So for the main composition, you'll do 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. Pretty straightforward, pretty standard. Shouldn't have any problem with that. But for this technical assignment, you're going to take all of your WAV files and you're going to bounce them out as 16-bit 22K stereo WAV files. And you're also going to bounce them out as 8-bit 22K mono core audio files. So this assignment is all about bouncing files and paying attention to all the details and the formatting of the files, because the formatting of the files is very, very important in order to make them work in the game. So bouncing files, probably not all that challenging or difficult for you in the class. But for example here, let's say I wanted to bounce this out and I wanted to bounce it out in multiple formats. There are a couple of weird things in Logic to make this all work, and just a couple things I wanted to point out quickly. Right, so you're ready to bounce this out, and we'll even do this. Right, delete this, delete that. This is what we want to bounce out. And you want to bounce out a 16-bit 44.1 regular old file. So you go up here and you go to WAV, and you do 16-bit 44.1. It doesn't directly say stereo, but you have split and interleaved. An interleaved file is a stereo file that most people are thinking about, where it's a single file with 2 channels in it. You don't want split, at least for this purpose, where it's a .L and a .R. It's 2 mono files, one for everything that is left and one that is everything for the right. You want interleaved. And you check the beginning and the end, and PCM WAV file. You can add it to the project if you'd like, and then you'd hit OK, and you'd bounce it. And you name it exactly according to the asset list. You name it, well, these are the lower resolution, but you name it in the same way according to the file name given. So nothing extremely crazy there. And even bouncing out into a lower resolution, right? These are WAV files, 16-bit 22K stereo. This part also doesn't really present people with all that much trouble or issue. You just go to WAV file, 16-bit 22K, and interleaved, and you bounce it out. And so while it's really kind of a simple process to begin with, it's really a focus on making sure that they're all named right, all formatted correctly, and you paid attention to the details across all of the files. Typically, people have no problem with these WAV files. Bouncing out core audio files at 8-bit 22K mono presents a bit more of finagling from Logic here. Core audio files, if you're not familiar with core audio files, they are a standard audio format from Apple. All of your Apple loops inside of Logic are made with core audio files, or they are core audio files. And it is kind of like an MP3 file or an OGG Vorbis file, if you're familiar with that, or where they reduce the overall file size with maintaining as much quality as possible. It is a lossy format, so there is some effect on the quality of the audio. So if we want to bounce out 8-bit 22K mono core audio files, you go highlight your file and you bounce the file, Apple Bounce. And what file format? Well, you can get a core audio file out of Logic. That's pretty straightforward. And you do an 8-bit 22K audio file. and that's just paying attention to the settings. And then you want mono. This is the problem, or this is the challenge in working from Logic here, is how do you get a mono file? You go to file type and you have two stereo formats, interleaved and split. You don't have a mono file format. So how do we bounce out mono files? Get out of the main bounce window. The first thing you need to do is you go to your output channel here and you switch it from stereo to mono. There's these two interlocked rings here. They represent stereo, and you switch it down to mono and you get a mono channel. You'll notice even your meter gets fatter and skinnier as it goes from two channels to one channel. So, okay, now I have a mono output. Now I should be able to bounce mono. So I hit Apple B and I go look at file type and I still don't have stereo. So you're not going to use the regular old file bounce to bounce out of this session. This is one of the problems I have with Logic, where it gets to be, I would think that all bounce windows are the same, that wherever I want to bounce a file, stereo or mono, I would hit Apple Bounce or Apple B, and it would allow me to bounce the files. But don't choose it from the file menu up at the top. You have to use this BNCE button, which I kind of find a little ridiculous, but this BNCE button will bounce directly from this output channel. And while it looks almost identical, notice that this file type is now grayed out, and you do not have the ability to do a stereo file, which means that this is a mono file format. You have a core audio file, 8-bit, 22K, mono file. Check the rest of the parameters, and you're ready to go. You hit OK, and you name it properly. So those are the two things in order to get the mono file. You switch to mono, and you hit BNCE here. There's a workflow PDF, this, that goes through all the process of how to read the asset list, how to bounce out 16-bit 22K stereo files, how to bounce out 8-bit 22K mono files. Do not use file bounce. Use this BNCE button down here. And those are the main keys to that assignment. The people that have the most trouble with that assignment didn't bounce out mono, and that would affect the overall result. So that gives you some information about all of your assignments. I think that's enough for me. That should wrap it up for the this session. If you have any questions, you can stick around, and I'll stick around for a few, and you can ask those. But let's go ahead and wrap it up here. And again, like I said, I will be posting up the archive by tomorrow. I don't think I'll get it all rendered and uploaded by tonight. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. So I will see you again on Thursday. Have a good afternoon.